Professor Ahmad. In today's session, we shall have about 30 minutes of lecture followed by 30 minutes of question answers. Due to microphone noise, we shall keep everybody muted. You can write down your questions in the chat window and I will read them out to our speaker during the question answer session. Brief introduction of Dr. Ahmad. He is a Pakistani social scientist, an educationist and professor of Islam. Currently, he is the Vice Chancellor of Rifa International University, Pakistan. In the past, he was the first Dean of Faculty of Usuluddin and Faculty of Social Sciences at the International Islamic University, Islamabad. Later on, he also served as the Vice President of the university, during which time he visualized and founded the Dawa Academy. He also served as the first Dean of Faculty of Islamic Revealed Knowledge and Human Sciences of the International Islamic University, Malaysia. He was given award by the Higher Education Commission of Pakistan. He was awarded fellowship by the University Science Malaysia. He also earned meritorious professorship at the International Islamic University, Islamabad. Now I request Professor Ahmad to speak on today's topic, which is ethical order, primary Islamic values. Professor Ahmad.
Jazakallah khair. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala khatim al-anbiya. This evening discussion, inshallah, will move around what are primary Islamic values. Can we have the first slide, please? If you recall, in my earlier discussion, we tried to understand how values are understood in the East and the West. With the bird's eye view about ethics and morality as such, now we'll try to understand what has been the basis of ethics and morality in East and West. I call it empiricist paradigm. It is empiricist because, as you see in the very simple diagram that took me quite some time to develop, you find local customs and traditions, whether in a village, in a city, in a country, are the basis of social constructs, social ideas, what is good socially, what is bad socially. And that ultimately becomes norms and values and laws of that society or country. It's a very simple diagram, but if you just keep it in mind, then whatever we said earlier, like Greek philosophy or Western philosophy, that means the roots are in Greece. Greek thinkers think. Democracy is like that. But that gradually became the memory of the whole Europe. Therefore, today you find global powers always talk about democratization, which means that is the ultimate norm for them. I've taken this crude example of democracy to demonstrate how local custom, local concept of democracy of city-state in Greece develops in a social construct, then becomes a global norm. And that's how values and the norms in the East or the West have developed. Next, please. The other slide now in front of you tells us what is the nature of Islamic values. It's a reversal of what we said earlier. For Islamic values, which I call natural and global values, divine guidance or revelation is the source, not local custom, not social agreements of people. But divine guidance tells what are universal values. Universal values change social custom and behavior of people, and therefore local culture is created by universal values and not the contrary. The statement in front of you says divine guidance from beyond guides through wahi. We say beyond because when local culture is created in an African village or in a Malaysian kampong, then it is the local base which people adopt. But divine guidance is not local, from inside, it's from beyond. Therefore, we say guidance from beyond, which is Wahi, in an objective manner. It is not subjective. All human ideas are subjective. I think the way I like, you think the way you like. It's subjective. Wahi is not subjective, it's objective. Then it also means that it is not intuitive. It is not a matter of how my inner feelings are. It's not a matter of how I feel like a mystical experience, a spiritual experience. Definitely, if I have a spiritual experience and I understand something the way I experience, it's very personal to me. How can that become relevant for you? You will have your own experience. Therefore, all human understandings, whether cognitive, whether mystical, whether intuitive, are subjective and personal. On the other hand, Islamic values are not personal or judgmental, but these are based on divine guidance or wahi that assumes the role of universal values. Next, please. What are these primary universal values, which is our topic of today? These primary Islamic values, which are universal, is first and foremost Islamic teaching of unity or Tawheed. Tawheed means in my life I should have only one ilah, only one God. I cannot have a God of popularity, a God of power, a God of pleasure, a God of my personal ego, a God of my monetary benefit. But I can have only one God. Therefore, when we say unity in life, it means I cannot have many boats to travel at one time. I can use only one boat to sail. If I sail in 2 boats or 3 boats, I drown myself. Therefore, unity in life means whether it is human beings or universe, there is ultimate obedience to one creator. Universe is following that creator, and I should also follow my creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fact of the matter is, if this aspect is understood, then unity becomes a universal value of any human being. Suppose a Chinese, a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Sikh, a Christian, anyone has a life where on Monday he is subject to his boss in his organization. On Saturday, he is subject to God in a synagogue. On Sunday, subject to God in a church. On Wednesday, he is subject to God in Wall Street because Wall Street tells him where to invest. In other words, he has divided his life in conflicting aspects. No unity. It's contradiction and conflict. But if he invests the way Allah wants, if he lives the Allah wants, if he talks the Allah wants, if he dresses the Allah wants, then he has unity in life. Now, for a while, why should a Chinese and a Sikh and a Hindu believe in Allah? Let's substitute that with the word principle. If unity in life is universal principle, and we're not using Islamic terminology Tawheed, but a neutral terminology, then even unity in life is required for a Chinese, for a Sikh, for a Hindu, for a Buddhist to have a meaningful life. In that sense, Tawheed is a universal principle because it brings the whole life as unified and relieves human being from all contradictions. This is first universal value. Second is equity or justice. That if we live in a society where you have diverse interests. There is no one to protect your rights. There will be always exploitation. On the other hand, if equity or justice is the basis, then whether a person is Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, or Muslim, it will be justice that will prevail, adl that will prevail. Therefore, adl becomes the second global value which has to be understood and which is applicable across the board. Then we find the third important value, and that is protection and promotion of life, which means that whether a person belongs to one religion or the other, one country or the other, one race or the other, life itself is valuable and must be protected. A medical doctor, a surgeon, a teacher cannot say, I will not teach knowledge to a person who carries a black skin or white skin or yellow skin. He will be unfair. And similarly, a person who is dealing with medical profession cannot say, I will protect life of only white men, only black men, only yellow people. Therefore, if we believe in protection, promotion of life, then this is a global, universal value for all human beings. And similarly, the next value is protection of reason, that human beings should act rationally, not irrationally, that we should not act illogically, that we should avoid all those aspects which make our behavior irrational. For example, if I take certain amount of drugs or liquor, then my reason is influenced by it. I act irrationally, emotionally, with imbalance, and all these aspects are linked directly with human reason and rational activity. So, any human society where people live must have respect and superiority for this value of reason and acting rationally. Next is the value of preservation of religious and cultural freedom. We live in a world where we have plurality, many religions, many cultures, many races living, and if each one does not have right to observe their religious rights, then it is unfair. We said second value is fairness. So second value compels that human societies should also allow religious liberty and freedom and right to practice. And then comes the protection of dignity of gene and genealogy. That with all science and technological development, we should know the life tree of a person, family tree of a person. If we have a society where no one knows about a child, about a girl or a boy, who is his mother or father, what their parents, from where they come, what family they belong, then we will lose identity of human beings. We will have anonymity. We will have no way of recognizing each other. The way we introduce each other is based on our name, our faith, our belonging to a country or a place. But if we have no roots at all, and human genes are available in supermarket, then how can we identify people? Therefore, it's a universal value. And lastly, the value of ownership and property. That whatever one owns should not be disturbed. People should have liberty, and state and society and individual all together should work together in order to allow people to enjoy their mal or property and not to be deprived of that. Next, please. Next slide, please. Now, whatever was said in that pyramid, in next few seconds, I'm trying to provide its support and evidence from the Quran. We said it's universal principle. The Quran says, had there been any gods in the heavens and the earth apart from Allah, the order of both the heaven and the earth would have gone to ruins. Which means the heaven and earth are in their place, in their order, only because there is one creator and one commander and one controller. Next, please. We also find in the Quran that He wants every human being at personal level to realize that we cannot have more than one masters. If in an organization you have two presidents, two prime ministers, two principals of a college, two vice chancellors of a university, you will always have a conflict. Therefore, the Quran says, say, do you serve instead of Allah that which has no power either on to harm or benefit you, whereas Allah alone is all hearing, all knowing. And the other verse says, do not call upon anyone apart from Allah, upon those who have no power to benefit or hurt you. No one but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has that power. Next, please. The same we find Tawheed's impact on political order. If in a country we have two kings, even when you have just 14 states, two kings, one is going in one direction, the other goes the other direction, what will happen? Clash and conflict. Therefore, the Quran says, all sovereignty, hukum, belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has commanded that you serve none but Him. This is the right way of life. Here the word deen is used very clearly in order to indicate that deen includes sovereignty, deen includes political governance and power. Next, please. Then we find that Tawheed has direct relevance with our law. So, with reference to the divine law, the Quran tells that those who fornicate, whether female or male, flog each one of them 100 lashes, and let not tenderness for them deter you from what pertains to Allah's deen. Which means you cannot have a law other than the one given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, you will have conflict. You may have in the masjid, in temple, in synagogue, a divine understanding. But when you go to law court, a conflicting law. Consequently, both will not be able to work together. Therefore, it says that Tawheed means law should also be confirming Allah's authority. And then it calls itself, these are the bounds, hudud, that has to be observed. Next, please. Similarly, we find that in financial matters, if I make my financial benefit my God and make investments just for the sake of becoming rich, whether it is halal or haram makes no difference to me, then I am living in a world where although I claim I believe in Allah or God or whatever name may be given by religion, but actually I am believing in God hypothetically, and actually my God is money. So the Quran says very clearly, those who believers don't eat up your property among yourself in vanities, but let them be amongst you, your trading by mutual goodwill, that you should not eat up the share of the other one, and you have to observe a very fair and transparent financial order. Next, please. Next. Again, you find continuation of same aspect. Here the Quran refers to interest or usury and tells us that this is something which is not acceptable at all, because it creates an oppressive society. The money lender exploits the needs of people and controls economic resources. Next, please. Tawheed in administrative justice means that the Quran also wants, when we want to appoint anyone, then we make sure that the person is honest and fair. So it says that do not give your trust to people who are not worthy of it. Give to those who are only worthy. And then when you judge between people, then you have to judge with justice, with equity. As where it says, Allah commands or enjoins justice, kindness, and doing of good to kith and kin, and forbids all that is shameful, evil, and oppressive. Therefore, administrative justice is also linked with global universal value of Tawheed. Next, please. We talked about the second value, Adl. First one was Tawheed, or unity in life. Now, Adl is one of the core teachings of Islam. It's also a major attribute of the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is sustainer. It is desirable behavior, quality, to be reflected in the attitude of all believers and in their behavior towards their Rabb, towards universe, toward their own self and others. If I am trying to destroy nature, I am not fair and just, like the burning of or destroying of rain, forest, etc. Or if I am polluting water, environmental problems, or I am not uh, dealing fairly with myself. My body may have a requirement of certain calories, and I may take 10 times more calories or 10 times less calories. In both cases, I'm not fair. Adl is not just a matter of legal justice. It's a universal value that applies in every aspect of life. Next, please. The meaning of the term Adl can be summarized in these few bullets. First and foremost, balance and harmony, then impartiality, equity and justice, non-discrimination, fair and just social conduct, ethical and moral responsibility. What and all that makes it an applied ethical principles. It's not just a hypothetical concept, but adl and justice is a pragmatic value, practical value. It has to be observed in every aspect of life. Next, please. You have here social implication of adl, which means that it is also demanding that if in some society there are people who are not married, then it is responsibility of the family, of society, and even the state to make sure that facilities are provided, and such persons who are without family and living a celibate life, a life without proper orientation, then they should provide resources to them and make them live a married life. Next, please. Next. Economic dimensions of adl are also very important. It means that every individual has a right to economic activity. So the Quran says, seek Allah's fadl. وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ. The right to economic activity also includes right to save and invest. Therefore, Quran and Hadith tell us that tijara and uh, uh, financial activities have barakah. Similarly, right to transfer is for every individual. So it talks about hiba, gifting, infaq, contributing, sadaqat, giving in the way of Allah. Right to inherit, which means varasa, having legal inheritance from people who pass away. And then similarly, right to just economic reward or ujra and dignity of labor. All these refer to the economic dimension of adl, the second big value we discussed earlier. Next, please. Impact of adl on political order can be understood in terms of holding of independent view or opinion, freedom of opinion. Secondly, assuming public responsibility. The Quran says all human beings are made Khalifa, not just a race or a group of people. And similarly, the Amir, the the Imam, all those terms which are used refer to responsibility which is based on ethical and moral behavior. And similarly, participation in decision making. Therefore, shura has been made obligatory. Formulation of a group or jama'ah is a value. To fight for truth, stand for truth, for public good is an obligation. To remove injustice is an obligation. To propagate and implement maroof or good is an obligation. And all these are summarized in one single term, that adl in political matters. Next, please. Similarly, adl has its impact on the domain of religion, which means to understand and interpret the Quran, it's not a matter of a clergy, just a few mashayikh who know everything. But the Quran says, read me, understand me. I have been made easy for you to understand. That relate yourself with me. Again and again, thinking, pondering, analysis are used with reference to the Quran, and that means every individual who has the basic capacity is supposed to approach the book directly and understand, and that is adl. Then right to practice one's faith and culture as a non-Muslim is a demand of adl. And similarly, the principle of ijtihad as a requirement for the ummah means that there is no rigidity, no specific group who speaks for religion, but anyone who meets the criteria of understanding the Quran and Sunnah can come up with a juridical opinion. Next, please. We talked about value of life in the pyramid of values, and now here you find the Quran telling you very clearly that do not kill any person. Allah has forbidden to kill except with right. And then on that account, we ordained for children of Israel that if anyone slew a person, unless it be for murder or for spreading mischief in the land, it would be as if he slew the whole of humanity. Therefore, preservation and promotion of human life is a value. Next, please. Value of protection of family tree, I talked earlier. Here you have the evidence from the Quran. Next, please. Then value of reason, we talked earlier. The Quran tells us that in the game of chance and intoxicants, there is a great harm for you because you don't act rationally. Next, please. Then we find the religious and cultural freedom mentioned in the Quran when it says that for you, your religion, for me, my way of life. And then there is no compulsion in religion, which means you have complete religious freedom and liberty. Next, please. Value of ownership, the Quran says very clearly that you are not supposed to exploit those who are not fully aware of their resources, like orphans. Don't think that you can play with their resources. You have to be extremely careful about ownership of people. Do in the interest of them and not just exploit them. Next, please. Now, very quickly, I have gone on these bullet points in order to give you an idea about these are 7 universal values on which the whole structure of Islam is developed. These 7 values have been quite often reduced to 5 as objectives of Sharia, but I look on them differently. I look on them as universal values which are for the whole of humanity, not for just Muslims. And therefore, the presentation of my Quranic passages and their elaboration indicates very clearly is not confined to Muslims, but Sharia has benefits and direct relevance with every single human being because it is talking about universal values without which no human being claiming any faith can properly, fairly, and justly live. I'm available for questions, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair. We are still waiting for questions. In the meantime, let me put one question regarding the Western concept of freedom of speech. And we have Islamic concept of having independent opinion about things. So how do they correlate and where do they conflict?
Well, the basic difference is that Islam allows every believer and even non-believer to raise his or her voice, not only expressing opinion, but also right to protest. Therefore, the Quran says, it is not appropriate to raise your voice, but if you are harmed, if you are facing injustice, then you raise your voice. Allah heard the voice of person who was wronged. Similarly, the Quran says, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, in all matters consultation, and then says, consult till you are able to reach a consensus. Azmul umur. Therefore, in Islam, freedom of opinion and a right to disagree is established by the Quran. The difference is, everything in Islam has an ethics. And ethics means that you have to raise your voice not by way of breaking windows and burning tires and destroying properties of people, but in a very systematic, organized manner. We find examples where Khalifa is giving a sermon and a lady stands up and says that, Umar, why you make such a statement? Who allow you? And no security personnel rushed on the lady to capture her, stop her from talking and giving her views. Rather, Umar welcomed that and declared publicly that you are right and my view was wrong, which means welcoming difference of opinion. But definitely it does not mean that you play with the honor of the other person. Unfortunately, Western right to express opinion has gone to the limit where you can slander a prophet, slander a hero of a people, and do whatever you like in the name of liberty and freedom of opinion. That is not allowed in Islam. The Islam says very clearly, you cannot do tanabuz bil alqab, you cannot do ghiba, you cannot defame a person. And all those aspects make Islamic right to disagree and to raise your opinion and raise your hand more human, more ethical as compared to the Western concept of liberty and freedom.
Jazakumullah khair. Next question from Nuruddin. Can you please explain more about Islamic ethics related to the environment?
Well, we define environment in terms of whatever is around us. If there is greenery, if there are rivers and water and oceans, if there are birds, if there are insects, if there are animals, if there are human beings, if there is air, then air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution, all those are aspects of environment. Therefore, we find the Quran telling us again and again that you may use resources but do not exceed. A very simple example is that if you want to wash your car yourself and don't want to go to a gas station for getting it cleaned, and you take a water hose from your home and start giving it a shower for half an hour, while all you can do is take a bucket and a sponge or a piece of cloth and just soak it and clean it in one bucket. Instead of one bucket, I spent 10,000 buckets. If I'm making wudu and I open the water faucet, it's falling continuously and I'm doing my wudu. Hadith says, make your wudu by washing your parts to be washed not more than 3 times, even when you are at the bank of a river. Such a beautiful expression of environmentalism in the mind of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Because the environment, water is flowing, but still he wants me or you to use just 3 times and not more than that. Just observe in any mosque and you will find that people come, just open the water faucet and don't care. Let the water spill as long as they are there. Similarly, there is prohibition to destroy trees, prohibition to destroy animal life. The Prophet on him says in a hadith that if you have killed a bird just for game, then I will be the advocate for that bird in the day of judgment. Why she was killed just for game, for just checking how you can shoot things. Definitely, if someone is dying out of hunger and then he kills a bird, then it is allowed. But just for the game, which means preservation of life. So it's not one in every single area. When you are using dress and it is not clean, you are causing problems of environment. The person sitting next to you because of smell cannot breathe. In every big town you have smog, motorbikes, automobiles having their fumes. Is that good for health? Therefore, everything that harms human life or pollutes environment is strictly checked by Islam.
Jazakallah. Next question from Abdullahi. What is the role and responsibility of government to instill and establish all these values in the society?
Responsibility of state?
Yes, responsibility of state in terms of establishing these values in the society.
Yeah, you see, the Quran makes it very clear that if we give anyone authority in land, الذين مكناهم في الأرض أقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأمر المعروف والنهي عن المنكر. Anyone given authority in state has 4 responsibilities: to make sure system of salah is operating, to make sure system of zakah is operating, to make sure amar al maruf Nahi al-munkar is done. Now what is ma'ruf? Ma'ruf is everything that is ethical. And what is munkar? Everything that's unethical is munkar. Therefore, a state has obligation to implement ethical moral values or ma'ruf and stop all vulgarity, obscenity, sexuality, insult of people, all those aspects, nudity, all these aspects are to be prohibited or actions to be taken by the state. So Quran has not left this area, but has made it very, very clear that the state has to play an active role, not just an observer, not in the name of so-called freedom. Let people behave the way they want, but the state has to use its authority in disciplining people.
Jazakallah. Next question from Shahran Qasim. Throughout history, there were constant conflicts between Ulil Amr, those in power, and the people concerning justice and adl. How do you make sense of these continuing struggles?
Well, two aspects. Firstly, it shows that Islamic teachings persuade every believer to stand for truth and never feel afraid of dictators, tyrants, and rulers who may carry Muslim name but to never implement Islam. Therefore, the Abbasid, the Umayyads, the Fatimis, the Mughals and Osmanlis, you name any of the dynasties, in each dynasty you had ulama who stood firmly for truth. Ahmad ibn Hanbal and many others, Ibn Taymiyyah, and anyone you think of, they were always persons who stood for truth and never cared for what the ruler is believing. Secondly, history tells us that those who were tyrants and rulers with whom they conflicted, no one respects them as a hero. But those who were persecuted, sacrificed their life, offered their own selves for the sake of truth, they have been always taken as heroes of humanity, of mankind. And the big reward is waiting for them in Jannah. In this worldly life, you find that any student of history who knows what was the torture done to Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and many others, always has a respect for them as compared to those who did that evil deeds, evil torture on them. So the historical evidence goes in favor of those who were standing for truth and exposes those who were oppressive rulers and kings and princes. Next, please.
This question from Ismail. Could you please comment on the trend among the Muslim community to focus on practice of Islam through prayer and fasting, etc., but neglecting the ethical values you summarized throughout our daily lives, both at home, at work, and the marketplace?
Our dilemma is that Muslims for past several centuries have understood Islam as religion and not as deen. As religion, whoever believes in a religion understands it stands for rituals and ceremonies. Deen is not confined to ritual ceremonies, but deen means total behavior. In English language, the word religion, in Arabic language, the word mazhab, and in Muslim languages, its synonyms are used for Islam. People think Islam is mazhab. No, Islam is not a mazhab. Islam is deen. And the reason we do it we do not study the Quran directly, but listen to lectures, some sermons, some mashayikh talking about Islam, and we think there is Islam. No doubt, we should listen to some lectures and discourses, but should pay more attention to understand directly from the Quran. So, narrow vision of Islam as mazhab is first cause. Second, we have taken ibadat as ultimate objective, while ultimate objective is ubudiyya, not ibadat. Ubudiyya means servitude, submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every aspect. But we have unfortunately understood that ibadah itself is the ultimate objective. So we rush to masjid to make our prayer, and while entering, leave our shoes scattered in the entrance. Never put them in order. We make saf in the masjid, but never make saf of shoes. We make saf in the masjid, but never make saf in a bus station where group is standing and suddenly start moving. We confine concept of religion to rituals. And the blame goes to our scholars, to our teachers in universities, in colleges, in schools, media personnel. All those are to be blamed for their deficiency. Essentially, as I said earlier, it's a matter of reducing Islam to rituals by saying mazhab. If we take it as deen, then our behavior and akhlaq, the Quran calls the Prophet, peace be upon him, as best model of morality. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, that you have been at the highest level of akhlaq. And therefore, this aspects of akhlaq, huququllah, huququl ibad, both have been missing in our society, because we understand worship is enough if we are making prayer and making siyam and memorizing the Quran or listening to a beautiful qiraat without understanding. This is our concept of Islam.
Jazakallah. Next question from Muhammad. Can you please elaborate on productivity and efficiency in view of Islam?
The Quran talks again and again about whatever you acquire, kasab. The Quran talks always, whatever you achieve is to be measured and to be evaluated. The Quran wants people who are active and productive, not who are lazy and withdrawn. Therefore, the concept of jihad and ijtihad is making best effort in removing wrong and evil and establishing what is good and virtuous and ethical. Every single ayah of the Quran tells us that Iman is meaningless without action. So, as soon as the Quran begins or starts talking about those who are believers, those who are muttaqi, immediately the next word used is those who are believers are those who have khashya in their salah. Those who are believers are people who are custodians of their chastity. Those who are believers are persons who fulfill their promises and keep their promises. Every single place where the Quran talks about Iman or Taqwa is followed immediately by the behavior, actual things to be done. But we just read the Quran, never think on it, never relate it. We take just the beginning of the ayah and think we are believers, but not practitioners. While the Quran wants every single Muslim to be a practitioner and not just a believer. Therefore, amal salih, action, iktisab of uh, uh, wealth as well as knowledge and everything is made a practice for all believers. So the Quran and Sunnah are full of exhortations regarding how we are supposed to act dynamically, creatively in society, and have our impact on development and progress.
Jazakallah. Next question from Abdurrahman Imam about peaceful protests, such as people going out in the street and in front of government house to protest against something they don't agree with. Is it against Islam or not?
Well, the Quran has given this right to raise your voice to every human being. And therefore, so long we believe in the Quran, we have to follow it. And wherever there is wrong, it is an obligation. I understand it's not only a matter of Islam, but in all civilized societies, you find that right to protest, right to have a demonstration is given to people by constitutions. Most of the world constitutions have an article that gives them the right to express their opinion and to protest. And as I said, it does not mean that they, while they are protesting, they use bad language or they use force. That's not allowed by Islam. Islam wants us to make our feelings fully expressed, but with an adab, with a manner, with a etiquette, with a civilized manner, not in an uncivilized way.
Jazakallah. Next question from Abayomi about noise pollution. How do we manage a situation where adhan is seen as noise pollution? In my environment, adhan, especially the Salatul Subh, is now termed noise pollution because of the night time. Can adhan be stopped because of this?
Well, if you ever try to understand the way azan is given, and if you try to measure its impact environmentally, you will find that every single word of azan penetrates in the heart and mind of not only human beings, but in birds, in plants, and provides them a soothing effect, not a torturous effect as motorbikes with the especially designed silencers that make your noise more and more sharp, and young people on highways, motorways, they speed up their motorbikes, and same with automobiles, they fix a special kind of silencers which make huge noise, and that destroys the whole balance of environment. If you compare both, is a remarkable difference. Azan provides soothing effect, while noise pollution by way of automobiles or engineering devices disturbs the whole balance. And that can be demonstrated, and uh, empirical evidence can be traced for that. There are some researches done in that, and we find that research is done on the Quran recitation and its impact on animals, its impact on birds, its impact on plants, its impact on infants, and even on fetus. And those just indicate that it provides them a cooling and soothing effect and does not cause any kind of disturbance. While all other noises cause disturbance, if you continuously use a Kalashnikov and shoot one whole um, dozens of bullets and compare the impact with azan, you will have an empirical evidence to show that azan is not causing any air pollution. On the other hand, if it is so, then at the same time, the ringing of bell in a synagogue or a church should also be considered in the same way. Unfortunately, the countries where churches can have their ringing of bells, they think that is not pollution. Adhan is pollution. So this shows their conflict. But what I have said earlier is that scientifically the azan creates a soothing effect on environment and does not cause any disturbance.
Jazakumullah khair. I think we still have 15 questions and some of them seem very interesting. I hope that we can revisit these questions in future. I'm sure we shall save them. But today we have run out of time. Professor, could you please summarize today's session in a few minutes?
Well, in very brief words, I approach Islamic principles from a totally different viewpoint than my elders and scholars. The scholars of Islam are extremely possessive of the Islamic values. Therefore, they say these are the objectives of Islamic Sharia, which they teach in faculties of Sharia and Usuluddin, and assume they have done their job. I approach it differently. I believe the 7 principles which I have just shown to you in this slide, which is a new structure of the objectives, I take that as universal values for humanity, which means that if any human being with any affiliation translates those values in life, life becomes more meaningful, more peaceful, more fair, more balanced, more moderate, more productive, more respectful. So if we really want da'wah, then da'wah has to be given in a different manner. Not that Islam is for Muslims, Sharia is for Muslims, but we have to look on every concept, its relevance with humanity. So my purpose was that I wanted to liberate these values from the grip of only Muslims, because these values in the Quran are sent to humanity, hudan linnas, not for Muslims. And therefore, these values should be approached with a different mindset, that these are for the whole of humanity, and human beings' welfare, Islam's main concern. Islam wants them to live a life of unity, a unified approach, not fragmented life. Islam wants them to be fair, truthful, and honest. And therefore, these 7 basic values, which we'll elaborate later on with auxiliary values, and I'll deal with those inshallah later on. But these basic values are the basis for the whole legal structure, social structure, economic structure. Everywhere, these 7 values have their basic role. That's why I call them universal values. And I hope in a society like Malaysia, in a society like Turkey, elsewhere, those who are joining us will be able to appreciate the approach. It is not confined to Muslims, it's for the humanity.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you everybody for actively participating in the lecture, and Jazakumullah khair, Professor Anis. Brother Shahran, over to you.
Thank you so much, Prof. As Prof said, we will move on to universal ethical principle for the next topic for next week, inshallah. So Prof will expand more on what we have discussed for the past 2 lectures. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Prof. See you next week. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.